some questions for turf. So I think that's where we're going to move to next. And then we'll wrap things up with some ornamental type questions. So I think we've got Mitchell, who's in, Greg, who are going to help us with some turf issues. And I don't mind throwing my 2 cents in here and there. Y'all know that. So
good deal.
Yeah, we'll get us started. So the first question that was sent in says, and I put this in turf, even though it's not like specifically grass, but the plant is a grass technically. Our community is being overtaken by bamboo. How can we get rid of it before it damages landscaping and structures? Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, there's different ways to go about this, I guess. One is, is there like a little grove of bamboo, a stand of bamboo that's on somebody else's place, it's creeping over towards you? Is it on your place and it's escaping? That sort of thing. Bamboo's tough, because it does spread. It's got those underground rhizomes, and it will creep from there and just encroach into other areas if you don't do something to stop it. Alabama Extension's got a publication on bamboo control, and it lists several things there. And one of the options that is listed there is to use a physical barrier. Now, and let me preface saying that I'm not saying this stuff's easy to do, okay? But you are talking about creating a physical barrier that will encourage the rhizomes to move in a different direction, not out laterally so much, but cause them to go up versus encroaching into other areas. And you're talking about a barrier, buried 2 feet deep down, something like that. Hard plastic, metal barriers, stuff like that, to keep the rhizomes from moving, as much laterally, but forcing them to move up. And then when you've got them moving upwards and they're breaking the ground there, and you can cut them off. If it's an area you can mow, bamboo doesn't tolerate frequent mowings. If it's growing up into turf areas and you can mow those on a regular basis, then eventually you'll cause them to expend all their energy and they're going to die. Okay, but if that's not an option, if it's creeping over onto you, and can you use an herbicide to control it? Well, you can't use a selective herbicide. Glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup and several other products, does have efficacy against bamboo. You're talking about using, like, say, a 41% glyphosate active ingredient product and about a 5% solution. So you're talking about like 6.5 ounces of that 41% glyphosate per gallon of water applied to relatively young, small bamboo. And if it's real tall stuff, you're probably better off to cut it down, cut it back to the ground, let it regrow, get some good tender tissue out there, get some good leaves. And, you'll see different recommendations on it, but probably in the 3 foot or smaller range is where you want to make that application once it does regrow. Keeping in mind that glyphosate's going to kill desirable grasses and other plants if it comes into contact with it. So another option besides spraying it is to wipe it on. You can do that a couple of ways. Use brushes, whatnot, but put a rubber glove on your hand and then put a cotton glove or an old sock over that rubber glove. Instead of mixing the glyphosate solution in a sprayer, mix it in a little pail and then just dip your hand with it's got the rubber glove and the sock or the cotton glove on it into the solution, and then wipe your fingers onto the foliage. You can be a lot more precise about where you apply it if it is coming up into ornamental beds and so on. You keep it off other plants, but those are it's not, and you won't do it with one treatment. This is not a one and done deal. You're talking about a long-term process. Long-term, how long is it? Well, I don't know. It depends on how well developed the bamboo stand is, I guess.
It's like who's going to last longer, you or the bamboo, right? So you just have to
perseverance. You got to have stick-to-itiveness. Be able to persevere.
That's right. That's always my first go-to when folks ask me about bamboo. I'm like, no matter which road you take, whether you're trying to mechanically control with mowing or chemically controlling, like, you're just going to have to stay on top of it. It's not a one and done. It's a on and on and on and on. So that's a really, really tough one to handle there. We had a question in the question answer that was about turf. Somebody might have answered it. Lucas, did you type the answer in there? I was gonna
No, it wasn't me. It must have been someone else.
Oh, okay. I can't remember what the question was. I think it was
There was a
Bermuda
question
was
about
taking over.
Bermuda, yeah, creeping into their tall fescue. Yeah.
And I wondered if, I mean, some other people with us today may be having the same issue. We might.
I know, I think Seth answered that, and he suggested to him that if you got patches of where Bermuda has crept into your tall fescue, you might treat it with glyphosate to kill those patches of Bermuda, as well as the surrounding tall fescue that comes into contact with glyphosate. A little bit later on this month, because we're moving into the tall fescue seeding window for the fall anyway, and then just overseed those areas. And so that's good. That'll take care of patches you've got right now. But if the neighbors have Bermuda grass, it's going to keep coming over time. There is a publication at the Tennessee Turfgrass Weeds website on suppressing Bermuda in tall fescue as well as zoysia grass, that lists some herbicide programs that can be used to help suppress Bermuda grass. But I'll be honest with you, that the best answer, no, maybe not the best answer, but the most realistic thing is to learn to like Bermuda grass.
Agreed.
It is learn to like it, I guess, because as long as the neighbor has it, and you've got tall fescue, then there's going to be a little bit of a battle there. There is chemistry that will suppress it. You've got to start, it's early and often. It's a program. It's a sequence of things that you do. But again, if you'll check out the publication, Bermuda grass control in tall fescue and zoysia grass, it's available. You can probably find it at uthort.com on the Tennessee Turfgrass Weeds website as well. It'll give you some ideas there. But what Seth wrote regarding killing the existing patches here in just a few days, sometime probably later on this month, and then be ready to overseed starting in September is a viable option also.
Awesome.
One thing I wanted to jump in there and add, are you sure it's Bermuda grass?
Yeah, maybe it's nimblewheel.
And right now, and I had a note that I wanted to mention, nimblewheel, when we start moving into this time of year, every year, I have people that come in with patches of crabgrass that are starting to show up in their turf. And it's actually a perennial grass called nimblewheel. And as Mitchell just said, we're approaching the ideal time to renovate and or just plant turf grass, cool season turf grasses, fescues. So if you've got those big patches of nimblewheel, a lot of times I tend to recommend more non-selective herbicides, kill it all out, and then come back in and plant, because you can use something like tenacity to control it. But one thing, if you've got this whole big giant mat of nimblewheel that's moved into your turf and taken over this area, if you kill it out, you've got bare soil. Mother Nature doesn't like bare soil. Mother Nature will plant some other stuff there, and it's not going to be turf grass, it's going to be weeds. And so I tell people to plan on just making that renovation right now, and proper identification of what the weeds you're trying to kill is really important.
A way to differentiate nimblewheel from Bermuda grass, well, there's a couple of ways. If you got a dense patch of it growing in the shade, it's going to be nimblewheel, because Bermuda grass doesn't grow very well in the shade. Okay. And number two, try pulling it up. If you pull it, if it pulls easily, it's nimblewheel. If it pulls back, it's Bermuda grass, because you don't pull it up very easily. Nimblewheel got a lot finer stem than common Bermuda grass does. But just walking by and looking at it, yeah, they're very similar to each other in appearance.
They are. I mean, either their blades look very similar, their texture is very similar. So even if they're mixed together, like I noticed some in a client's lawn the other day, they said, why are there's some patches in my Bermuda that have lots of seed heads on them, but the whole yard isn't, doesn't have the seed heads. And it's because those little patches were the nimblewheel. So I'll try to see if I can get some good photos and put those on the UT Hort Facebook page so that people can see the difference in that. So those are good. I'm glad we went in that direction.
UT's got two good publications on that, Controlling Nimblewheel. Another one that I would tell homeowners to be on, and I've been getting a lot of questions on here of late, Dallas grass, which is a perennial grass that looks a lot like crabgrass or goosegrass. And people are like, man, I can't get rid of this crabgrass. That's because it's Dallas grass. Our UT Turfgrass Weeds website has got some great resources on controlling Dallas grass, and it's the one's kind of got the unique seed heads at the top, like the little flags. I would tell you to pay attention to that, check that out. And the last thing, you had a question in there, I think, in the chat box about horse pastures and buttercup. Buttercup is going to be an annual type broadleaf weed that is best sprayed either late fall or early spring. There's a number of products, probably the cheapest and easiest would be 2,4-D that can easily clean buttercup out of pastures if you use the right timing of the application of herbicide to control that. When they're really small and actively growing, buttercup can easily be controlled with 2,4-D.
And you'll probably see buttercup with pretty good leaf development in November even. So some mild days in November, a 2,4-D ester application will do a good job of controlling that buttercup, and you be the cheapest herbicide option you'll find.
Great. And I'm just loving this action that we're getting in the question answer box here. So someone mentioned, I see Seth is typing the answer, but Greg, we mentioned a minute ago that we're coming up on the great time to overseed for some of our cool season grasses and turf. And they asked if you could elaborate. So maybe just give like a couple seed recommendations so that people know what they're supposed to be planting this time of year.
Okay, so for me, in cool season type fescues, I generally tell homeowners where you're trying to plant is the area suitable for planting cool season turf grass. The soil condition, is it your fertility right? And then overall, your management of that turf grass are going to be more important than the turf grass that you actually pick. Now, having said that, some are better than others. Dr. Samples would probably recommend to you some of the new novel type turfgrass fescues, which tend to be blends of fescues that tend to tiller out a little bit more. You know, fescue grows in a bunch, but there are some cultivars that tend to tiller out and will spread a little bit more. A couple of brand name examples, and the cultivars in these brand names will change each year, but Defiance XRE, which stands for Extreme Rhizome Expression, or Turf Saver RTF, which stands for Rhizomatous Tall Fescue. Those would be two really good ones. And I tend to tell people use, more of the novel turfgrass type fescues for those particular areas. Remember, fescue is a sun-loving plant. It wants to grow in the sun. If you're looking at trying to grow in areas where you're getting less than 50% direct sunlight, I tell homeowners, you probably want to blend in or use more of the creeping red or hard fescues. But ultimately, if you're trying to grow fescue in dense shade, you're probably going to be unsuccessful. And I tend to tell homeowners, landscape around those, right plant, right place, grow hostas, not turf grass.
Good answer. Good answer. Let's stop fighting against what nature wants to do there. We really probably could have spent a whole session just on turf grass, because this is a time of year when things are really getting going and we've got a lot of things happening. But before we leave turf grass, I would like to, Mitchell, would you talk maybe just a minute about fall armyworms? I mean, I feel like we probably would have seen them if we were going to have a large influx this year already.
Yeah.
But kind of like, let us know what's up with that.
Okay. So you bring a good point, and we've had here in Rutherford, in Middle Tennessee, Rutherford County, Murfreesboro area. I mean, there were some lawn care services that sold preventative armyworm treatments to folks, and they applied them back early in the year. And probably if there's any value to that, it's already played out by now. The good news is I have not heard of a single armyworm infestation out
I haven't either.
anywhere in
So
Tennessee. And folks asked, early in the year, well, do you think we're going to have armyworms like we did last year? Well, just based on history, I would have bet no, we probably won't, because in my 35 years, that's the first time I've seen anything like that. So the odds were against it. But armyworms don't overwinter in Tennessee. They've got to come back into the state. They don't overwinter here. They've got to come back from further in the south. So the adult moths fly in. They're brought in on storms move through from the south, moving back up towards us, and those adult moths will be carried with it, and so they'll get out here and they'll start reproducing, and you'll begin to see those armyworm outbreaks, and usually, in Tennessee, it's probably in August when we hear about them. The years we do have them, generally, and typically tend to hear about them more on your side of the state first, Celeste, in West Tennessee is where we typically hear from them first, and then they may come over this way. So do you need to treat for armyworms? Well, no, not if you don't have them. You don't need to. And how do you know? Well, if you
would know.
If you go on a weekend trip, if you leave on Friday afternoon, everything's nice and green. You come back on Monday and it's brown. Chances are you got armyworms.
Good point.
And you probably had them for a couple of weeks by that point, because they're getting towards the end of their larval stage and ready to go in the ground and pupate and become adults. And that's when they do most of their damage, those last few days. When there's a worm, okay, when there's still that caterpillar, you can do a soap flush if you suspect there might be armyworms out there, or a soap flush works for other insects too. But in essence, you just take a couple of tablespoons, teaspoons dishwashing liquid. I don't know there's a precise amount to use, but put some dishwashing liquid in a couple of gallons of water. And just slowly pour that over areas, and if there are armyworms or other insects there, then they're going to come to the top. That's going to irritate them. They'll come to the top, and you can physically see them. And then if you find them, there's a number of insecticides that homeowners can use. There's some granular products that can be applied. There's a Scotch product, Grub X. It's a granular material. Chlorantrilipole is the active ingredient in it, and that one may provide the longest lasting protection. Some of those that have some bifenthrin in them, some cyfluthrin, some beta-cyfluthrin, and those are active ingredients you'll see on common lawn insect control materials that are available at garden centers for homeowners. And even if you don't see any damage, but if you notice, birds out in the yard feeding on stuff, well, you might have armyworms. They're feeding on something. They eat insects, so you kind of look for those. And some of these I forget what they're called. They're a wasp. You'll see them hovering over the ground. They'll actually, prey on some of those armyworm larvae. And so if you see a number of them, I'm not talking about, necessarily those red wasps that'll sting you, but some of the other kind of more parasitic sort of wasps.
Yeah.
But maybe even red wasps too. I think they might even feed on armyworm larvae. But anyway,
good point.
It's a possibility, but we haven't seen them yet, so that's a good sign.
That's a good sign. I think we're good, but just wanted everybody to have a heads up and know that this is the time of year when it would happen if it was going to happen. So keep your eyes peeled for that.